5 centuries before the Common Era, the world was already shaped by power, ambition, and fear. At its center stood the Persian Empire, vast, organized, and relentless. It stretched farther than any empire before it, connecting distant lands through roads, tribute, and military force. Persia did not expand through chaos. It expanded through planning. To the Persian kings, resistance was not personal. It was administrative. Regions either submitted and were absorbed or resisted and were corrected. Across the Aegean Sea, the Greek world existed in sharp contrast. It was not a single nation. It was a collection of independent city-states, each fiercely protective of its autonomy. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, all different in culture, politics, and priorities. Unity among them was rare and often temporary. What connected them was not agreement, but identity. The Greeks valued independence deeply. They governed themselves, argued openly, and fought one another regularly. But they shared a belief that no foreign power had the right to rule them. That belief had already been tested once. In 490 BC, a Persian expedition had been stopped at Marathon by an Athenian army that refused to submit. That defeat did not weaken Persia. It informed it. The empire learned, and it remembered. 10 years later, the response came larger, slower, and far more deliberate. The Persian king Xerxes did not plan a raid. He planned a transformation. This would not be a single battle. It would be a demonstration of inevitability. The empire prepared for years. Engineers built bridges across seas. Supply lines were mapped in advance. Armies were drawn from dozens of subject peoples, infantry, cavalry, archers, engineers. The scale alone was meant to intimidate. Xerxes did not need every Greek city to fight him. He needed them to believe resistance was pointless. As the Persian army moved westward, some Greek cities submitted without resistance. Others hesitated. Many waited to see what Sparta would do. Sparta was different from every other city-state. Its society revolved entirely around war from childhood. Spartan men were trained for discipline, endurance, and obedience. They did not fight for wealth or expansion. They fought to preserve their way of life. When news of the Persian advance reached Greece, debate followed. Athens argued for resistance at sea. Sparta considered its options on land. Smaller states feared being caught in between. Eventually, a fragile alliance formed, not because the Greeks suddenly trusted one another, but because they understood the alternative. The question was where to stand. The Persian army was too large to face in open terrain. A direct confrontation would allow Persia to use its numbers fully. The Greeks needed a place that limited movement, restricted scale, and neutralized advantage. That place was Thermopylae. Thermopylae was not a city. It was a narrow coastal pass between mountains and the sea. In some places, the road was barely wide enough for a few men to stand side by side. Large formations could not maneuver there. Cavalry would be useless. It was not a place to win a war. It was a place to slow one down. The decision to defend Thermopylae was not heroic. It was practical. If the Persian army could be delayed there, the Greek alliance would gain time. Time to organize defenses. Time for naval forces to operate. Time for cities to prepare. Sparta agreed to lead the land defense. But even Sparta faced constraints. Religious festivals prevented the full Spartan army from marching immediately. Sending a massive force was not possible. Waiting too long was dangerous. So a compromise was made. King Leonidas of Sparta would lead a small advance force. 300 Spartan soldiers would go with him, men chosen not at random, but deliberately. Each had living sons, ensuring that Spartan families would endure no matter the outcome. They would not fight alone. Allies from other Greek cities joined them, bringing the total force into the thousands. But the core of the defense would be Spartan discipline. Leonidas understood the situation clearly. This was not a mission to defeat Persia. It was a mission to hold a line. As the Greek force moved toward Thermopylae, they passed through cities that watched silently. Some offered support. Others looked away. Everyone understood what was coming. When the Persians reached the pass, they found the Greeks already waiting. Xerxes did not attack immediately. He waited. To him, the sight of a small force blocking the path was confusing, not threatening. He expected them to retreat once they understood the scale of the army facing them. For days, the Persian army remained idle. Messengers were sent. Warnings were given. Submission was offered. The Greeks did not move. The delay was not a mistake. It was part of the plan. Every day the Persians waited was a day Greece gained. Eventually, Xerxes concluded that delay no longer served his purpose. The example had to be made. The order was given. The road through Thermopylae would be forced open. What followed would not be decided by numbers, but by space, discipline, and resolve. And that is where the battle truly begins. When the Persian attack finally began, it did not look like the clash of legends that later generations would imagine. There was no dramatic charge, no sudden collapse. Instead, there was movement, slow, deliberate, and controlled. The Persian army advanced into the narrow pass exactly as planned. The front ranks moved forward, confident that weight and numbers would break resistance. Against most enemies, that assumption would have been correct. At Thermopylae, it was not. The Greeks did not rush. They did not shout. They did not scatter. They formed a solid line across the road, shields locked together, spears angled forward. The narrowness of the pass meant that only a limited number of Persian soldiers could engage at once. Behind the Greek front line, there was no confusion. Men rotated forward and back in controlled intervals, maintaining strength and order. The Persians attacked repeatedly. They expected fear. They encountered discipline. Persian infantry pressed forward, but they could not bring their numbers to bear. Each wave met the same barrier, shields, spears, and men who did not give ground easily. Those who fell were replaced immediately. The Greek line bent, but it did not break. What surprised the Persians most was not resistance, but rhythm. The Greeks advanced and withdrew in short movements, drawing attackers in, then pushing them back. The terrain amplified every mistake. Those who stumbled had nowhere to recover. Those who advanced too far found themselves exposed. After hours of fighting, the results were clear. The Persians had gained nothing. Xerxes watched from a distance. This was not how the day was supposed to unfold. He ordered elite units forward, troops meant to end resistance quickly. These soldiers were better equipped, better trained, and accustomed to success. They failed as well. The pass remained closed. As the fighting paused, something unexpected began to happen inside the Persian camp. Doubt spread quietly. Not panic, but uncertainty. The Greeks were not retreating. They were not collapsing. They were doing exactly what they had come to do. They were holding time. On the second day, the attacks resumed. The pattern repeated. Persian forces advanced. Greek discipline absorbed the pressure. Losses mounted with no progress. Xerxes could afford casualties. What he could not afford was delay. Then, a solution appeared. A local Greek, familiar with the terrain, approached the Persians with information. There was another path, a narrow mountain trail that bypassed the main pass. It was difficult, hidden, and lightly guarded. Using it would allow Persian forces to appear behind the Greek line. The information changed everything. That night, a Persian detachment began the climb through the mountains. The movement was slow and dangerous, but uncontested. The Greek defenders assigned to guard the trail were surprised and forced to withdraw. By dawn, the Persians were behind the pass. Leonidas received word early. He understood immediately what it meant. The position was compromised. The delay had achieved its purpose. Now, a decision had to be made. The Greek force was not trapped yet. They could withdraw while time remained. Many of the allied contingents did exactly that, retreating to fight another day. This was not cowardice, it was strategy. Leonidas stayed. The Spartans remained in position, joined by a small number of allies who chose not to leave. They knew the outcome. They accepted it. This was no longer about holding the pass indefinitely. It was about control of the moment. When the final attacks began, they came from both directions. The Greeks were now surrounded, but the terrain still limited Persian advantage. The fighting was close, exhausting, and relentless. Spears broke. Swords were drawn. Formation mattered less as space collapsed further. The Greeks fought until weapons failed. When weapons failed, they fought with whatever remained. There was no sudden end. There was no single dramatic moment. Eventually, numbers did what discipline could no longer prevent. Leonidas fell. One by one, the remaining defenders were overwhelmed. By midday, the pass was open. But the result was not what Xerxes had intended. The Persian army had lost time. It had lost confidence, and it had gained a reputation it did not want, that it could be delayed by men who refused to move. Thermopylae was no longer just a place on a map. It had become a symbol of resistance through restraint. The road to Greece lay open, but the cost of opening it was now clear, and the war was far from over. When the fighting at Thermopylae ended, the road into central Greece lay open. From a purely military perspective, the Persian Empire had achieved its immediate objective. The pass was no longer blocked. The advance could continue. But wars are not decided only by roads and territory. As the Persian army moved forward, the atmosphere had changed. The delay at Thermopylae had cost time, energy, and certainty. The Greeks had not won the battle, but they had altered the rhythm of the campaign. News of the stand at the pass spread quickly across Greece. It did not spread as a tale of victory. It spread as proof. Proof that the Persian army could be slowed. Proof that discipline and preparation mattered. Proof that resistance was not meaningless. This mattered more than the loss itself. Greek cities that had hesitated now reconsidered their choices. Some that had leaned toward submission began to prepare defenses. Others committed more fully to the alliance forming against Persia. Thermopylae, but something no army can manufacture on its own: belief. For Sparta, the outcome carried deep significance. Leonidas and his men had not failed. They had done exactly what was required of them. The Spartan understanding of duty was not centered on survival, but on purpose. Holding the pass long enough to serve the larger strategy was success. The loss reinforced Sparta's reputation across Greece, not as conquerors, but as defenders who did not retreat when retreat was easier. For Athens, the delay proved critical. While the Persian army had been slowed on land, Greek naval forces were maneuvering at sea. Time gained at Thermopylae allowed coordination, planning, and preparation for what would come next. Without that delay, the balance of the war could have shifted decisively before naval resistance was ready. Thermopylae was part of a larger design. The Persian campaign continued, but it no longer felt inevitable. Each movement was now measured against resistance that had already proven itself when later battles were fought. Especially at sea, the psychological impact of Thermopylae lingered. Greek commanders knew that disciplined defense could shape outcomes. Persian commanders knew that assumptions could be costly. The story of Thermopylae did not become powerful because of how many fought there. It became powerful because of how clearly it demonstrated limits. It showed that even the largest force depends on space, timing, and coordination. Remove those, and strength becomes less reliable. It also exposed a truth about empires. Expansion creates confidence. Confidence creates impatience. Impatience creates mistakes. Thermopylae forced the Persian Empire to confront that reality earlier than it expected. Over time, the story changed. Later generations simplified it. Numbers grew. Details blurred. The complexity of alliances faded into a single image of sacrifice. This is how history often becomes legend. But the real significance of Thermopylae is quieter. It was not about defiance for its own sake. It was about choosing where to stand and why. Leonidas did not hold the pass because he believed it was impossible to lose. He held it because losing there, slowly and deliberately, served a greater purpose than retreating quickly. That distinction matters. Thermopylae reminds us that some battles are fought not to win, but to shape what comes next. That delay can be as powerful as victory, and that decisions made under pressure often matter more than the outcome they immediately produce. In the years that followed, Greece would survive the Persian invasion, not because of Thermopylae alone, but because Thermopylae made survival conceivable. It turned fear into resolve. It turned resistance into strategy. This is why Thermopylae endures, not as a myth of perfect heroism, but as a lesson in restraint, timing, and purpose. It was war before it became legend.